HSC heading into vacation period. So let's go ahead and get started. I think we're going to peak at probably 60 or 70 this time. A couple updates from this office. The first one being that the research strategic plan is moving towards a good draft. It's been reviewed by the president and by the provost. They would like some changes, and then it'll be reviewed by the deans and the research associate deans, and then it'll work its way through the faculty senate and then be posted for general review by the public across the university and elsewhere. It is naturally, because we're hitting the summer months, the process has to slow down because a number of faculty will not be able to look at it over the summer months. And so I now anticipate that the final version will probably be produced late August to early September. A lot of work has gone into this, and so we want to get it right. So that's the number one update from this office. I guess the other thing is that uh, pretty much everyone who's affected knows, but the director of the NIGMS will be here not this week coming, but week after, and we've put together a very jam-packed schedule. It'll be the director and two program officers for some of our IDEA institutional development state projects. And so it's a rare opportunity to get the director of an institute in a room with some of the leaders of research here at the university, and then sort of a bonus because they're focused on statewide reach and economic development. The lieutenant governor will be sitting in as well, and then the president will be meeting with them on the schedule currently. So that's a great opportunity for the university. About a quarter of our NIH funding comes from the NIGMS. And so it's a chance for us to shine, and everyone is busy working on their presentations. I think that's all I really wanted to say today. We've got some really interesting speakers and presentations today. And if Lee, if you want to lead off with the introductions, please go ahead.
Sure. So we're going to start today with Debbie Davis from the School of Medicine. And she's going to talk today, and you're in pediatrics, right, Debbie?
Yes.
Okay. She is going to talk about it's racism, not race, a theoretical framework for change. And so I'm going to turn it over to you.
Let's see if I'm sharing the screen here. So, there we go. I've been studying early childhood development, behavioral mental health for many years, and disparities, of course, are well known. And we just kind of got to the point where, okay, we know there's a problem, we know there are differences. We need to start working on understanding the mechanisms. And at this point, all of what I'm presenting is on theoretical, but spoiler alert, we found out there weren't really good ways of measuring racism. So we have developed a model that I will present to you, along with how we propose that we might want to measure some of these constructs. These are my collaborators that have been working with me for a number of years. And so any of you all that have done any work with pediatrics, like I said, we know there's disparities in health and development. And for many years, and really even still, we're just often just presenting that there are these differences. And it's only recently that we've really started trying to get more into understanding why there are these differences and what these mechanisms are. We know that poverty and race have both been associated with adverse developmental outcomes, but these relationships are complex and they only partially explain these outcomes. It's hard to disentangle the effects of poverty and race because we know minoritized populations are more often families in poverty and also less educated. So it's really difficult sometimes to pull that out. But we know that that race is a social construct. So we shouldn't, when you keep saying these differences, there are differences, there's differences, it gives the appearance that these are some kind of biological difference when in fact we know that race is a social construct, and we need to begin to understand, what it is that's responsible for these racial and ethnic differences. So we wanted to start exploring more about racism in these early childhood outcomes. And so we've picked kind of a particular population and a particular outcome that we're looking at, but we think that the model we've developed could be adapted, and different groups could be used, and different outcomes could be looked at in a similar way. So we think it has more applicability than just what we have chosen. Again, those of you who do any work in pediatrics are quite familiar with Bronfenbrenner and others, but he was one of the first people to describe how this individual is impacted in this dynamic way across all of these different levels of systems, from the microsystem to the macro system, and how all of these things work together to influence child outcomes. In a similar way, Ohima Aruka in 2022 presented this model, and I'm not going to talk about all of the things in the model. It's very complex, but she was looking at a similar systems kind of way of how racism impacts the child at each one of these different levels, and not only in each of those levels, but how it impacts cross generations and cross the lifespan from prenatal to old age. So we kind of use that to help us think about, this racism construct is not unidimensional. We need to think about measuring it at more than one level. Perceived discrimination isn't enough, which is sometimes the only measure that's been available, and people use that a lot, but that we need to start thinking about how can we look at this from multiple levels. And because we're looking at early childhood, we are particularly focused on parenting behaviors, more so than how racism is impacting the child's development. We think it's through the parenting behaviors. So we're kind of focusing on how racism affects parenting, which in turn affects children. So there has been some literature that has looked at the effects of stress on a number of physical and mental health outcomes, and studies like MIDAS, the midlife in the U.S. longitudinal study, has looked at how stress has impacted adult outcomes, aging, any number of other outcomes, and how this is accumulated over time. What's not been so apparent in the literature is how this stress might be related to racism. Another similar concept that has been talked about in the literature, it was originally introduced to try to understand differences in birth outcomes for Black women compared to their white peers. but the idea is that this compounding of these stressors over time and over multiple levels just wears the person down in such a way that it has this negative effect on their health outcomes. But there's very little that's been studied about this in terms of how this wearing down or weathering impacts parent behavior, and then how that impacts child development. So one of the really important behaviors in terms of cognitive development, so we've chosen to apply this model we were developing to look at cognitive self-regulation in children, which is an important task in their cognitive development. And a really important parenting behavior has been identified, and it's just a very rich literature on this behavior called scaffolding. That literature has been studied cross-culturally, and this behavior has been shown to impact child outcomes in an important way across multiple cultures. And what this behavior suggests is that when a child's learning to do some kind of a problem-solving or cognitive task, that the parent provides this scaffolding, just enough help to help the child be able to do the problem at hand without taking it over or being too directive or too overbearing in the task, so that the child learns how to do that task independently. And as the child takes on harder and harder tasks, each time the parent, provides just enough support to help them solve the problem. So if they were working on a puzzle, the parent might say, "Oh, what piece do you think goes here? Where is my red piece? Do you have a red piece?" So they would just provide these kinds of questions and suggestions to the child to help them figure out how to do this task on their own. So we kind of chose this parenting behavior to put in our model of how we want to look how racism may impact the parent's scaffolding behavior. Where we think there's gaps, that there has been some literature about the effects of stress on parenting behavior, but there's really not much known about how this racism-related stress relates to the parenting behavior. But as you can imagine, that this stress causes fatigue, depression, and the stress itself just may interfere with the parent's ability to kind of be in tune with their child and provide this kind of parent-child interaction. It may affect what we call their parent sensitivity. They're just not tuning in to the cues the child's giving them and providing the kind of help that they need, because they are so distracted by all of these things going on in their world. And there's other parenting behaviors that in the literature frequently been called negative parenting behavior, where they might call scaffolding a positive parenting behavior. But most of those studies have been done in white middle-class families. And one of the things that we don't know is maybe some of these more restrictive parenting behaviors or directives may have a different meaning in higher risk families. And Dr. Aruka referred to this as adaptive parenting. So it could be, and this is something we'd like to study more as well, although we know scaffolding is a positive parenting behavior, we'd like to understand other parenting behaviors and what might be supportive in a more unsafe or higher risk environment. So the parent may be providing some extra guidance because they think that's needed in order to guide the child when there's more chaos going on or there's more negative influences coming their way. So again, we think that this model that we're developing could apply to other kinds of things. We've done a little bit of work in this area with some secondary data analysis, but using data that's available like IQ, which is just too global of a measure. We feel like we need to have some more specific kinds of outcomes, and we've chosen cognitive self-regulation, but we think it would probably work looking at some executive functioning skills and social emotional development as well. So I'll show a more detailed slide that shows what goes into these measures in just a second, but this is basically our model, and that we think that race will be at least partially mediated by the racism-related cumulative stress. And we think there may be a direct effect on the child outcomes, but we really think the biggest impact in early childhood is how this racism-related cumulative stress impacts the parenting behavior, which then impacts the child behavior. And then it was really important to us to also think about protective factors, because of course, in the short term, we can't really change the racism-related cumulative stress exposure, but maybe we can look at what kind of factors might be protective, and particularly for the caregiver. I think if you were to apply this model to older children, you might also want to look at protective factors for the child, but we're thinking more in terms of protective factors for the parents. So these are the yellow box and the pink box, what's going into these measures. We looked at the literature for really any factors that we thought were related to either parenting behavior or to early cognitive development in children. And again, wanted to make sure we were looking at multiple measures and multiple levels of where this racism-related cumulative stress might originate, and came up with these. And we have a grant under consideration at the moment, and we're going to use confirmatory factor analysis to try to find the best measure for this multi-level racism-related cumulative stress. But you'll see some of the things in here, like caregiver mental and physical health, that some people may think of as being an individual factor, where we're kind of looking at it that because, and we're particularly looking at Black families, but because they're disproportionately impacted, that we kind of feel like mental and physical health belonged in this measure, because it's really partially caused by discriminatory practices, and same with education and income. So rather than looking at them really as an individual factor, we're thinking about them more in the way they've been, the way income and education has been impacted through racism. So those are the measures that we want to include in that cumulative stress variable. And then for our protective factor, again, we wanted to look at what the literature has shown us about what kind of factors might have previously been shown to impact parenting behavior, and came up with these neighborhood cohesion, parent self-advocacy.
It's like 12:30. It's 4 or 5 minutes.
Okay.
So yeah.
So
So the elevator, I'm going to use rest.
racial, ethnic identity and socialization, social support, and spirituality and religiosity. And again, we'll be using confirmatory factor analysis to determine which ones of these things best hold together to have this protective factor. So we can't really get to the point of testing our model until we get some better measures of the constructs in our model. So that's kind of where we are at the moment. And I'm happy to take questions, and that is my contact information if you want to contact me later.
Does anyone have any questions? I think one of my questions, Debbie, you mentioned you have a grant that is currently or proposal currently under consideration. Is that with NIH? I'm just curious. Okay. And then with this work, are there any potential areas of expertise that you need from other disciplines that maybe could help with some of this work from a different perspective?
Well, I mean, I think that it's a big problem, and there's lots of places where we could apply this. And again, I think we can apply it to different kinds of outcomes. So people may have some ideas of maybe where that might fit in, say, education or, other, of course, health. We know that it could apply to health outcomes. So, I mean, I think there's probably lots of different ways that this model could be taken and applied to different groups and different, in order to apply, I say, like our model to, maybe if we wanted to apply it to Latina parents, we might need to change a few of the variables that are in each one of our measures, and that would be specific to those specific groups. And of course, I don't have that expertise, so maybe someone else would have that.
We do have a couple of questions, but I want to be cognizant of the time as well. So I think, Maria, you had your hand up first.
Deborah, I would like to meet with you separately and talk about it. My PhD student is defending her prelim exam this Monday on the effect of traumatic experience on characteristics of caregiver speech in both mothers and fathers. So I can, talk to you. I mean, it's very, very close, and kind of let's meet and discuss further.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, send me an email and we'll set that up. And I also forgot to mention, we've primarily been focusing on mothers, but we also, would like to extend that to look at fathers. It's hard to do them at the same time because they do have different parenting strategies. So fathers is another group that we would like to look at in the future. So yes, shoot me an email and we'll set something up. Thank you.
All right, and then one more quick one. Lauren, I think you were the second person.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I'm in the sociology department. I'm the chair of the department here, and I also run the Center for Environmental Policy and Management, and am a community engagement coordinator for the UofL Superfund Research Center. I'm very excited to see the work that you're doing. It's very heartening to see folks in other fields take on how measuring or looking at the impacts of racism, all the various forms of racism. I'd encourage you to think about specifying interactional racist experiences, as we sociologists are really good at that, but we're also really good at talking about structural racism and systemic racism. And so I think you've got a good start at capturing the interpersonal and the structural in all of that. I think that's really exciting. I'd love to talk to you more at some point. I've got a couple of other colleagues who used to be here but are in other places who might actually be really useful. One in particular is a woman named Heidi Williams. She's at Virginia Tech, and she's done a lot of work with family unit interactions, and it's really interesting what she's done with some of the work tracking longitudinal outcomes with dyads and triads within family, and from a demographer's perspective, I think some demographers would be helpful in some of this, especially as you're looking at early childhood outcomes and that interaction with parent, right? The other colleague is Latrice Best, who was here, and I'm still working with her on looking at the intersection of intergenerational justice and environmental justice, looking at through a housing policy framework. And so within a context of climate change. So it's very complicated. So we're doing a similar thing with this model, with a modeling piece. And Latrice is very good at looking at life course at particular points in time and over time. and has done aging and other work in that realm. I think she would also might be interested if you're looking for other kinds of model or anybody to feed this off of. She might be good. So I can send you an email about that at some point, or feel free to get in touch with me as well. But I would love to talk to you more. I'm so excited to see what you're doing. This is great.
Yeah, send me an email and we'll set something up. Thank you.
Awesome. Great.
All right. Thank you, Debbie, for again presenting to us today. So let's see, we've got 12:30, and I think we have told both of the remaining speakers they could have 15 minutes. So if everybody can talk fast and leave maybe a little bit of time for questions and answers, that would be great. So the next one is John Lee. He's with the College of Education and Human Development, and he's going to discuss maintenance outcomes of a research-based early intervention for young children with challenging behaviors, the first step next.
Thank you very much. It's happy to be here, and I can be expedient, I promise. I appreciate all those folks who are attending. I really enjoy these types of opportunities. I'll be presenting to you today a little bit about a very direct, behaviorally oriented intervention for very young children in schools who are already demonstrating kind of a tier 2, sometimes tertiary level behavioral challenges. The first step next is the second edition of First Step to Success, which is a long-standing intervention process that is focused entirely on positive recognition of positive behavioral orientations in schools, particularly at transition points for young children. And so you'll see that I'm a member of a research consortium of individuals from various institutions. A good majority of them are senior scientists from the University of Oregon, Oregon Research Institute, University of Missouri, here at the University of Louisville, and of course at UCLA. Now, the first step next is the intervention that is done specifically within the classroom of the young child. This study focused on children in preschool, their last year in preschool before kindergarten. This is a tier 2 intervention. It stretches from pre-K, like I just described, all the way into the 2nd grade. It is specifically for children who are exhibiting fairly significant behavioral challenges. The program takes approximately 30 days to complete. It's a partnership between the parent, the teacher, and a behavioral coach. It involves one-to-one behavioral skill lessons for the child, social skills learning, you might have heard of that term before, in-class coach support for the first 7 days of the program, and then in-class teacher support where the coach transitions from initiating the program with the children to supporting the teacher in their initiation of the program throughout. Although the intervention is focused on one child in the classroom, it is a class contingency. So it's presented as a game, and the game is a green card game, kind of like green is go, good behavior. And the overall situation is one of a contingency where all the students are working together. So the individual child who may be a focus of the intervention isn't singled out for the delivery of the intervention itself. For the sake of time, I will keep going, let you know that this is an IES-funded 4-year efficacy trial, which is a replication of an NIH trial of this same intervention process. On the road to the WorkWorks Clearinghouse, which is kind of a repository of empirically validated intervention practices for young children. Both NIH and IES like to have replication at the efficacy level of most of their studies. This was about 8 years into 12 years total of federal funding around this particular project alone. Our research design was a cluster RCT. It was based in multiple sites across the country, Kentucky, Illinois, Oregon, mostly Head Start sites, although some state-funded preschool sites were also a part of that, particularly here in Northern Kentucky. We randomized by site or the building rather than individual classrooms. There's obviously some kinds of contamination if you have both a control condition and a intervention condition within the same building situation. So we randomized at the building site. We did target 1 student per class, and the students were identified with a very common and well-studied tool called the Systematic Screening of Behavioral Disorders, Walker and Grisham, in its 2nd edition. Data was collected at baseline. So if you think about the school year, when children enter school in August, roughly for most of our sites in August, teachers get to know them over the course of several weeks. About mid-September, they know them well, and they can tell you who exactly might need some intervention practices in the classroom. It's at that point that we went in with the SSBD, identified this 1 child. The child who then became part of the study, and this team, this triad of the coach and the teacher and the parent working together, went through the intervention process, and at about day 45 was a post-intervention application of our data collection. And then again, we were very interested with this study in focusing on what the maintenance of those behaviors over time was. Often we see a lot of studies in this area, a lot of the literature that indicate that there's good post-intervention effects for young children. But what's lacking in the literature is a pretty thoughtful review and empirical measurement of the child's outcomes later. And so in the spring of that child's preschool year, so if they were intervened with in September and October, we did a post-intervention data collection in November. After the Christmas break, all through the next semester and into the April and May is when we collected similar data, if not the same exact data, in the spring. So it was quite a nice look at a year-long maintenance after the intervention in the fall. You'll see here that was a pretty widespread recruitment process, about 53 programs. We randomized finally about 50 of them, 3 dropped out for various reasons. Those programs randomized into this kind of FSN, First Step Next intervention condition with 83 classrooms, or kind of a business as usual condition, and there was 77 total classrooms in that regard. You'll see the final piece of this Gantt chart here demonstrating on the left-hand column there the classrooms at all 3 points in time that we had information was about 67, and in classrooms the total package of data collection points, about 61 finished that process. You can take a quick look here at the students' demographics. There was no significant difference across for either the student, teacher, or parent in their demographic information. So you'll see student, teacher, and parent demographics. Here's the parent. Moving on to the instrumentation then, we utilized the social skills improvement system rating scales, and I believe that's in its 2nd edition as well. A very well-developed and well-oriented measurement system for children's social skills and problem behaviors. You see the subscales in the middle column there, and the reporter on the right-hand side. The systematic screening of behavioral disorder scales, which has not only an adaptive behavior index, but a maladaptive behavior index, and an aggressive behavior scale, which we were very interested in, reported on by the teacher. A relational aggression scale, the preschool social behavioral scale from Crick, the teacher reported scale there, and child-teacher conflict, which is Pianta's work from the student-teacher relationship scale, again reported on by the teacher. So one of the first things that we did, and I'll just start here with social skills. Again, this was a teacher report. We took time then to kind of compute the effect size of the maintenance effect on the far right-hand side here for each of our outcome measures. Now, teacher reported outcome measures across the board demonstrated statistical significance, And here in a little bit, you'll see how we accounted for the nested kind of variability amongst the student within classrooms, within programs. And the maintenance gain was the difference between the baseline and the end of the year follow-up. We utilized, and you'll see down here at the bottom, Hedges G for our effect size measure. It's sensitive to smaller end studies like this one, around 125 or so total children, teachers, and parents. And it obviously represents then this kind of not only standardized difference in the mean, but also it utilized the standardized pooled variability and standard deviation of the two. So it's a nice effect size. And what you can see here is that the teacher reported social skills between the first step next intervention group, who is in the orange line, and the business as usual group, who are in the blue line there, had a medium size effect at 0.74 with a fairly strong confidence interval as well. In this particular case, you see that the first step next group or intervention group had a lower score than the business as usual and ended up with a much higher score. Again, statistically significant. Problem behavior, a similar outcome here where we see the intervention group starting at a higher level of problem behavior and dropping down into just below 115, it would be into a typical range, and then elevating slightly across the span of the school year back to 117. But still a medium effect size, you'll see in the bottom left-hand corner there with a strong confidence interval and a statistically significant. The student-teacher reported conflict, and I'm showing you some of the better outcomes. We can always refer to the paper to see the entire suite of outcomes, which were strong. Parent side, not statistically significant. Teacher side, yes. But of course, the intervention was done in the classroom. So you'll see here this student-teacher conflict, which was very interesting to us, given that again, the intervention group started at a much higher level than did the business as usual group, and fell within almost a normal range, 24 on this particular measure, with a medium-sized effect in the difference between the two. Now, what we did here is that we wanted to take a peek at we knew we had nested variability here, and we wanted to make sure that we accounted for that similarity across classrooms and programs in particular. So for each outcome, we set a 3-level regression model. We fit this model, and these models were estimated using REML, right, restricted maximum likelihood estimator, just to account for the nested structure of the data. And we wanted to look at the 3 kind of time periods and nest students accordingly. So at level 1, students were that very first level, and they were nested, of course, within classrooms at level 2, and then programs at level 3. And this helped us to account for this kind of shared variability that you often see across these types of studies, where you have children in classrooms and in programs that may have some similarities to each other or differences. And to examine the treatment effect of the first step next, we examined the interaction between time and intervention, which really is indicative of the change in the outcome over time between the first step next group and the business as usual group. So the first interaction effect that you see here represents the change from baseline to post-intervention. So it's that difference between that September-August pre-intervention measure and that November, early December post-intervention measure. Very immediate effects that you're looking at there. And the second interaction effect that you see here and across to the right is that represented the change from baseline to the end of the year follow-up in that November-December look across the intervention for both conditions. Now, we also then looked at a complete case analysis to make sure that there was no differentiation between these two interaction time effects, meaning that if they were similar or non-significant, then maintenance truly happened. This intervention effect was carried out over time. And indeed, that case-wise analysis came back as non-significant, meaning that these two were very similar statistically. Now, as you can see here in this table, for all the teacher-reported outcomes, the post-intervention treatment effects and the maintenance effects were really statistically significant. I have mowers outside my window. Please excuse that. They have large mowers here at the campus, so you'll probably hear some of that.
And John, I'm going to interrupt too. I just want to give you, we need to start wrapping it up if you don't mind, so that we have time for the other presenter. No, that's okay.
Basically, what you're seeing here is that we have demonstrated that this particular intervention had a great deal of effect over time without any kind of boosters or follow-up maintenance within the classroom, that children maintain the gains that we originally saw at post-intervention. Especially relevant for us was the conflict scale, and we are very happy to see that reduced teacher-child conflict maintained over the course of time. So thank you very much. Please follow up with me if you have any questions.
Thank you so much. I'd like to say, as a parent of a child with a disability many, many years ago, I'm very familiar with ABI, more than I would like to be. All right. Thank you very much. If anyone has any questions for John, feel free to either put them in the chat or reach out to him separately via email. And then our last presenter I'm pleased to introduce is Sho Young Wang. He's from the School of Public Health and Information Systems, and he's going to talk a little bit about mediating childhood trauma and cortisol stress reactivity, leveraging AI approaches. And so I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me right now?
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so thank you for the kind invitation, and I'm really glad to attend this event with so many expertise, like in the social sciences, early childhood like education, or the pediatric. So basically, my topic today is pretty close to the previous speakers. But this is also because I'm a data scientist and a biostatistician, so this is more about how to use the model to address a specific problem. And I just want to advertise our model, which want to show you that the AI-based approach can not only like do very powerful like estimation procedure, but also is able to provide the inference procedures such as the p-values, confidence intervals, and also do some selections, to make our like problem like more like reasonable. Okay, so I'm just gonna introduce our topic, which is to leverage on the AI approach to do the estimation and inference on the high-dimensional mediation analysis, and in the application with selecting the DNA methylation loci, which mediate the childhood trauma and the stress level. And you can always reach out to me via my email, and we can discuss like further stuff about this topic. Okay, so this is our motivation. Like we're interested in this childhood trauma and stress level. So this is because like people believe that the individuals who have experienced the childhood trauma tend to have stronger reaction, under the stress. And they also believe that this phenomenon is mediated by like tons of the DNA methylation. And there are also some confounding effects that intervene in this procedure, such as the age, sex, and different factors. So in our data set, we actually, I use a little bit like math notation just to show our model later, but this will not like have any impact on your understanding. So basically, we collect our childhood trauma based on the childhood trauma, like a questionnaire score. And we also have our stress level, which is measured by the cortisol stress reactivity. So that is our response variable. And we also have tons of like DNA methylation loci located on the CG site. So there are like nearly 500,000 of these DNA methylation loci. And there are also 8 confounding effects, which include the age, sex, and different types of cell proportions may intervene in this procedure. And there are only 85 individuals, but there are like tons of the DNA methylation loci. So this is definitely a high-dimensional mediation analysis. Okay. So if we take a look at our distribution of the stress level, basically this is this distribution is a bit skewed instead of the center, right? And also we observe that there are a lot of like outliers or the extreme values for the higher level of this cortisol stress reactivity. So instead of only focusing on the center of the data, such like we want to do the regression for the average like individuals from this group, we're particularly interested in the higher cortisol stress reactivity groups. This is because people believe that this higher level of this cortisol stress reactivity is related to the disorder of hormones. So we want to particularly see like the higher level, for example, the 70% of the quantile or the 90% of the quantile of these individuals. And we want to see that how the childhood trauma had a direct or indirect effect on this stress level. Okay, so this is our question. So motivated by this, we propose this path diagram. So in this path diagram, the first thing we're interested in is what is the direct effect of this childhood trauma in this red line direction on the cortisol stress reactivity? So this is the first question, right? And also, if there are any effects through this DNA methylation by these yellow lines, and we see that this childhood trauma on the cortisol stress reactivity in this pathway. And in this mechanism, we have these confounding effects, age, sex, and we have different ways to intervene these whole procedures, such as it actually having impact on the childhood trauma. It will influence the all this DNA methylation and also the outcome stress level, right? And there are very complicated interactions between all these DNA methylations. Okay. So another question we also want to ask is that if we detect some indirect effect through this childhood trauma to the cortisol stress reactivity, then are there any important DNA methylation among others that we can see that has very important contribution to this pathway? So we kind of want to delete some irrelevant DNA methylation, but keep the important ones in this in our model to interpret them. Okay. So motivated by this path diagram, actually we introduce a little bit method notation. Here we just want to emphasize that to able to interpret and do the statistical inference of this direct and indirect effect, we basically still adopt the conventional linear model in this pathway. For example, from this exposure, the childhood trauma, to our response variable, which is still keep the linear interpretability, and as well as this indirect effect. So all these effects are linear. However, for the confounding effect, they are just some nuisance factors. Actually, we do not care about them. So that's where this AI deep learning stuff just jump in here, and we model them, use very complicated models to increase the accuracy of the prediction. Okay, so here we see that this G and F are just some complicated functions, and we don't have to give them specific structures. So that's how we model this. And basically, I just to show you a visualization of how we implement it. So basically, we have high dimensional mediators as input in our model, and we kind of select them using some traditional statistical regularization approach, which is called the SCAD. And this is a partial linear structure. So for the linear part, we keep the interpretability, which means we can do the statistical inference for those variables that we're interested in. But also, we incorporate these nonlinear components. These are just purely complicated network-based or any other kind of structures that we can consider. But this just help us to increase the prediction accuracy or prediction ability, and make this model more powerful. Okay, so based on this model, we are able to get the direct effect, the total effect, and we use the subtraction to get the indirect effect. And this model can also select the important DNA methylation. Okay, so now let me just give you the conclusion of what we find based on our data set. So as I said before, we perform the mean regression, which means that we focus on an average person that we select from a specific like population in the study, but we also focus on the quantile regression and specifically for those like higher level stress, activity like a person, right? So we focus on different quantiles, starting from the median to the 0.7 and 0.9. These are just the higher level groups. Okay, so they are very interesting findings. So let's focus on the effect first. So when we see that if we have the childhood trauma that have the effect on the stress level, we see that if we do the like average mean regression, there's no significant direct effect, meaning that like the childhood trauma, like individually, do not have any effect on the like stress level. However, this impact is actually through this DNA methylation, which is called the indirect effect. This is significant, and it has negative impact, meaning that for those individuals, like for average individuals in this study, the childhood trauma through the DNA methylation actually like stimulate a kind of defense like mechanism, like for those individuals that they, instead of like increasing their stress level, they probably just stay calm under the stress. And this is very interesting finding for the average like group. However, if we see this particular group instead of the entire population, there is a sequential pattern that we can observe. First of all, we see that there is actually like significant direct effect for all these three quantiles, meaning that for this higher level of the stress, under the stress, they actually have this like defensive like mechanism, even for this direct effect, meaning that the childhood trauma directly have this create this like defensive like mechanism for these individuals. However, like for the indirect effect, this is how we assume that this childhood trauma has actually very strong, especially when we increase the quantile for those people, we actually see that more intense like indirect effect through the DNA methylation. And at this time, this impact is positive, meaning that through the DNA methylation, the childhood trauma actually has very like positive contribution to their stress level. And this is just will increase their like cortisol stress reactivity when they are under stress. And another important thing is that for those DNA methylation, we actually observe this sequential pattern. So for example, like for all these red, like highlighted DNA methylation, they share the common ones, meaning that no matter what kind of analysis we conduct, these are kept in the model. So basically these red are very important and need further like attention. And also like when we increase from 0.5 and 0.7, they share the blue one, and from 0.7 to 0.9, they share the green one. So basically this sequential pattern indicates that maybe if we like take further analysis, for example, for the higher quantile for the stress level, basically this will actually contribute differently, like and we just are more interested in in the follow-up like analysis. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I'll just wrap up here because the time is just up. And yeah, I just want to let you know that we basically create this like statistical estimation inference procedure for the mediation analysis. And this is an AI-based model which has the partial linear structure. And it is important to use this kind of nonlinear part to address those like nuisance factors for those confounding effects. And we are also able to screen, like do the feature screening for the high dimensional mediators to select the important ones. And those linear parts are interpretable. And we also have the nonlinear parts, which just we use them to increase our prediction ability. And we also have this significant findings for those DNA methylation for those higher on cortisol stress group, and we definitely want to do more like analysis based on this. And yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate it. You're actually like within 30 seconds of time. That's wonderful. Does anyone real quickly have any questions before we turn off? And if not, feel free to reach out to him and separately. And then my last thing would be to thank everyone for attending. And also, we're always looking for suggestions for great research presenters. So if you or someone you know has a great new research project or has always had a good research project that would be very interesting and something that many on campus would be interested in, please reach out to me and we'll see if we can't get you on the schedule. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.